Join me today for a new BattleTech video as we discuss what is the Dark Age, part 1 of 2. Welcome back to those of you who've been here before. Welcome to those of you who are new to the channel. This particular segment is called Spinning My Wheels because it's usually while I'm driving, but I'm parked at the moment. So really only verbally spinning my wheels here and not literally. So the whole naming thing doesn't quite work right here, but you know, bear with me. So today is going to be a BattleTech video that I have tried recording a couple different times now and still haven't been satisfied. I'm going to attempt to answer a question that I got from one of the other BattleTech videos. I think I somewhat answered it in the actual responses, but it deserves its own real answer, and it's best going to be answered by making two separate videos because, well, there's two halves to the answer. And the question is, what is the Dark Age that we keep mentioning in the videos? Okay, so for BattleTech, the Dark Age is a specific time frame within the setting. Okay, so the setting has different eras, like the Succession Wars era, the Clan Invasion era, the Word of Blake Jihad era, the Star League era, the Age of War before the Star League or during the Star League. I'm not super knowledgeable on the beginning days of the Star League. Then, like I said, the Jihad, and then there's Relative Peace, and then there's the Dark Age setting, which just ended, and now there's the Ill Clan era. Okay, so the reason it's going to be two videos is because there's the direct, well, where does it fall in the timeline, what's its relevance, that kind of stuff. But then there's also the, but why did it come about? And that's a whole other separate thing. I'm going to reference some things that are going to be explained in the other video, but this is going to be the where it falls in the timeline video. And what brought it about? Well, in universe, what brought it about, not events in the real world. That's the other video. So, yeah, so here goes. So the Dark Age setting begins in 3132, I believe. I have some notes here that I want to make sure I get a few of the dates and everything right. Yes, 3132, with what was known as Gray Monday, even though all the action really started the day before on Sunday. So, okay, one quick note. I'm going to give what was kind of known towards the beginning of the Dark Age setting, and then at the end, I'm going to add in what has been revealed since then, because the Dark Age setting began like 20 years ago, and is the longest stretch in real-world time of any of the BattleTech settings. And there's reasons for that, and I'll explain those in the other video. But anyway, so whenever the setting begins, from the fan perspective, what we know is the HPG grid, the Interstellar Communication Network, has been severely damaged. 80% of the hyperpulse generators, HPGs, the device that enables interstellar communication, have been knocked out. The vast majority are knocked out because their cores somehow got burned out. Something like 3% are destroyed by direct action. In some cases, there was like a VIP on a tour who just pulls out a laser pistol and starts shooting important parts. One, a fighter laden with explosives smashed into the building and destroyed it. Forces lead assaults here and there, and there's no evidence of who's behind any of it, or if the attacks and the other that leads the core burnout are even related. Now, obviously, it's probably safe to assume they are, because it'd be amazingly coincidental that these random attacks happen just as the grid's being burned out. So, while it's possible, it's highly improbable the two are not connected. So, the only thing that was seen was an emblem on some of the machinery and soldiers of the people attacking, and it apparently was a sword with a serpent around it against a blood-red disc. Okay? That doesn't match anyone's insignia at the moment. So, once the grid went down, and then people began trying to fix the HPGs, and by people I mean Comstar, they quickly realized that they couldn't. They tried replacing the cores. They tried building a new HPG from the ground up with all new parts, and they still kept falling prey to whatever destroyed the original in that location. And I think it's even noted in one of the novels that they actually built whole new production lines in case it was a virus somehow buried in all the tech, because you're talking about technology that's centuries old. Like, the hyperpulse generators were built to last for centuries without having to replace the parts. And so the manufacturing lines would be centuries old and not used to having to try to replace the entire grid in one moment. So they're heavily taxed just trying to build new parts, and then those parts fail too. So as this happens, the Republic of the Sphere, which existed as kind of a new version of the Terran hegemony after the Word of Blake Jihad, and they existed, their center was Terra, Earth, and everything within, I think it's 100 light years of Earth, was the Republic of the Sphere. It's called that because go out 100 light years in a three-dimensional area, it's going to be a sphere. Plus, human-controlled space is called the Inner Sphere, so I'm sure it's also playing into it. One quick note, the damage didn't seem to go into the deep periphery, so the area now known as the Scorpio Imperium, where Clan Goliath Scorpion took over, I think it's the Hanseatic League, and basically now they rule the roost out there, setting up their own little empire. Their HPGs work. They were totally unaffected. So it stands to reason that the ones in actual clan-controlled space back in the home worlds are probably also safe, because they're a considerable distance farther than that. But the inner sphere itself and the periphery, not the deep periphery, was affected. So the clan occupation zones, like where Clan Jade Falcon and Clan Wolf, the Ghost Bears and Hell's Horses and the Snow Ravens, the Sea Foxes, and the Nova Cats, where they all have territory, even though clan HPGs are built on different principles, they were also affected. So anyway, the Republic essentially begins starting to fray at the edges. The Republic is divided up into prefectures, and I believe it's Prefecture 1 is Terra, and then there's, I believe, 9 surrounding it. It's been a while since I looked at the map. I could have that wrong. So in those prefectures, the Republic forces, well, the Republic is a created nation, okay? Kind of like the United States. It didn't didn't evolve from an existing group of people that had been there for millennia, who had, customs and whatnot that have been passed down, and they just finally just formalized in our era of nation states as, say, France or England or Japan or Egypt or what have you. It's like the United States. It was taken, and then peoples not native there moved in and then built it. Well, very similar things happen here. The Republic didn't really have much of its own army, so a lot of the units are from nation states that are friendly to the Republic, but they can still easily trace their roots back to their parent nation. And this became a problem the moment everything fell apart, because several of them were like, okay, well, now I'm going to fight for the glory of back home. The Republic is clearly dead. We're going to start carving up our own little fiefdoms here. And so you had several micro factions, I guess you'd want to call them, popped up. Among them, you had the Swordsworn, who were House Davian types, the Stormhammers, who were House Steiner types, the Steel Wolves, who were from Clan Wolf, the Nova Cats, the Spirit Cats, who were from Clan Nova Cat, the Dragon's Fury, who were House Kirita, and the Northwind Highlanders, who were from the Northwind Highlanders, because the Highlanders were a mercenary faction. Then they threw their lot in with the Republic. But this is kind of them going back to their... I don't think they went back to being mercenaries. They just became like an independent, like, we're looking out for ourselves now. And if we can help the Republic, sure, but, our home planet's important. We're going to defend it. Plus, we're going to take to the offense to fight others if it comes down to it. And Banson's Raiders is the other. Now, Banson's Raiders is kind of unique faction here, because they were a conglomerate of, obviously, mercenaries and hired guns, pulled together by a guy named Jacob Banson, who was a businessman, industrialist, had holdings, I think, in all the houses, and had the money to get a bunch of decommissioned battle mechs and to get them back up to fighting strength, as well as, to hire out, pilots for them, infantry, logistics, all that, putting together a real army. It's more than just, hey, I've got a few guys I can throw at this problem or this problem like a mercenary unit. He built an army, which requires a lot. And yeah, so they were essentially, like I said, obviously they would have been mercenaries, but they were under a more unified banner. It's hard to explain. They weren't, as a group, they weren't out taking jobs for money. They were going and attacking who Jacob Banson said to go attack. Okay, they had one benefactor. They were not collectively a mercenary unit. They were mercenaries forged into a real army, kind of. Which brings me to one of the baffling things that happens in BattleTech, and I think it's just because the authors play favorites, and it's really transparent and really stupid. But they do it. So it turns out, you find out later on, this is going to be one of those now for information we got after the Dark Age setting, like for more current books, that a number of the people within Banson's army were actually Republic spies. So they make this note that they just infiltrated the crap out of Banson. Now, they didn't do this to say the Dragon's Fury, so that they could figure out what House Kirita is doing, or the Stormhammers to figure out what House Steiner is doing, or the Steel Wolves to figure out what Clan Wolf is doing, and so on and so on. All these people that have parent factions that are obviously going to mobilize at some point that you would really need to know about. Now, that's not where we're going to focus our intel and potential sabotage. It's going to be the one guy who's bucking the feudal system. And it's just like, that's insane and stupid. So, again, I'm sure that's because there are people at Catalyst who are like, yeah, Jacob Banson, what a joke. Let's make him more of a joke in the fiction we control now. And it's, like I said, it's petty and stupid on their part. And I hate whenever things like that happen in games. Because it's happened in some others too. So, and on top of that, at the present moment, his fate is as of yet uncovered in any book. Like no book actually says what happened to him. But their representatives on the forums go with, well, he's dead. Okay, where'd he die? Somewhere, but he's dead. That's what matters. And it's like, he was kind of a major player in a kind of a big section of the game. Like, to actually know where he died would be kind of nice, or how he died. But instead, like every other character of note, you know exactly when and where they died. Jacob Banson, he's dead somewhere. Who cares? And it's like, well, I don't know, probably the people that brought the question up. And again, it just shows the stupid bias. And I'm not even a big fan of Jacob Banson. I just hate seeing people that control IP that they didn't create do things like this. So, yeah. There's a Star Wars author that did something similar, and I'm sure he'll get me on a rant one of these days talking about that particular situation. But anyway, so these various factions fought primarily within the former prefectures of the Republic. And then also there was the Republic military that didn't splinter. And so you had this, and then various, the various mercenary factions as well, obviously, like Hansen's Rough Riders and the Eridani Light Horse, and I believe the Ronin faction. So, basically you had years and years of fighting, and then finally the parent factions began to move. House Lao was the first of the real factions to enter the conflict, with its goal of retaking all the worlds it lost during the formation of the Republic, which it, I believe, has now accomplished. So, yeah, because it's chewing up Davian worlds now. So, House Lao, during the interim of peace, the Republic convinced a lot of the factions to shut down their factories, to stop making weapons of war. Not all of them, but stop making them in the numbers they were making them, to decommission the mechs they had and destroy them. And a lot of people complied. Lao lied a lot, and something like 80% of what they said they decommissioned, they did not. So because of that, and because of just planning for the day that they would be able to make their move against the Republic, they are now the largest military in the Inner Sphere at the end of the Dark Age era. So, plus they have a couple of allies. So they've got their situation. The Free Worlds League spends a big chunk of the Dark Age trying to pull itself back together because it shattered somewhere in the Jihad era. and was basically just the random collection of planets that used to be known as the Free Worlds League. And they're galvanized by an attack. I believe Steiner and Clan Wolf attacked them first, separately but in coordination. And then the Lao use assorted terrorist tactics against them, and also convince one of the sections of the Free Worlds League to not rejoin the Free Worlds League and instead ally with the Magistry of Canopus. That would be the Duchy of Andurian. And so the bait for this is the woman who rules the Magistracy basically offers to marry Duke Humphreys, who rules the Duchy of Andurian. Well, her brother is Doshin Lao, who rules House Lao. And they, in a very Game of Thrones-esque moment, and I can only assume the people who wrote this watched too much Game of Thrones to come up with this idea, the two of them have a daughter together, Denai Lao Centrea. So she's technically the heir to both the Lao and the Magistracy throne. And super technically, a potential heir to the Davian throne, because according to one of the various books that has a bunch of like secrets in it, Doshin Lao, no, Sun Tzu Lao, has some of Hans Davian's DNA, which is probably why he wasn't quite as crazy as the other Laos and was actually able to begin rebuilding his realm, and why Doshin was able to continue it. So technically speaking, Doshin Lao is also part Davian, and therefore his daughter would be as well. So yeah, that's kind of weird stuff you get into in BattleTech sometimes. But yeah, so as the setting progresses, the other factions begin getting in. The clans, the Jade Falcons, and the Wolves primarily begin making their moves, and leadership changes here and there in some of the factions. The Free Worlds League does reforge itself. Steiner suffers a tremendous series of setbacks, a coup, the loss of the Archon, the naming of a new Archon, and all kinds of stuff. House Kirita actually is doing pretty good for itself, and captures New Avalon, the capital of House Davian. This is largely because of their poor ruler, Caleb Davian, who is terrible. It was not supposed to be the ruler, but killed his dad, so he became the ruler. And yeah, so House Davian's also being devoured on the other side by House Lao. And then the whole Dark Age era ends once Clan Wolf captured Terra and proclaimed themselves the Ill Clan, which means like the clan of clans, the top dog. Okay, so now we're out of the Dark Age era and into the Ill Clan era, and that's as of 3151 is when that happens. So 3132 to early 3151 is the Dark Age era. And some notable things about it, aside from the big timeline I just laid out, towards the beginning of the conflict, there was a whole lot of use of modified industrial mechs, because the battle mechs had been scrapped. And so people were literally just piecing together whatever they had. Imagine the futuristic space version of whenever you see in movies, conflicts were like there'd be a guy in the back of a pickup truck with a 50 caliber machine gun. That concept, but in the future, in space. You know, instead of the dump truck, it's the dump truck mech. You know, with a bunch of missile tubes in the back, and the scoop replaced with an autocannon, things like that. Jacob Banson, to supplement his forces, created, I mean, not, he didn't like personally create it, he paid people to create it, the Raider mech, which is an ICE, internal combustion engine powered battle mech, instead of the normal fusion power plant that's within them. But the rest of it is a battle mech, you know, with real armor, real weapons. It's just that it doesn't have the fusion power plant, so it can't mount the heavy energy weapons. But it can still mount missiles and machine guns and everything else. And unlike, say, the dump truck, which is just heavy metal, this has, you know, real armor. So they are viable. You know, they're not the greatest. If you had your choice, you'd rather have a real battle mech, but they're better than being in the dump truck mech. So there's those things. Everyone has embraced combined arms by this point. You know, artillery, aerospace, infantry, the whole 9 yards. Even the clans, even though it goes against clan ideology. Then, so like I said, you had that. Because of the tremendous era of prosperity, everyone was able to rebuild a lot of their industrial base. So now they're pumping out war machines like there's no tomorrow. And it's not like the end of the third succession war where everything's been bombed to dust and you've got 5 battle mechs fighting for the fate of a planet. You've got hundreds on each side fighting for planets now, because everyone was able to rebuild. You know, they had decades of peace, so they rebuilt. Now, they didn't rebuild towards war fighting, they had to convert, but the industrial base is there now. The population base is there. Also, because of that, several of the factions made very stylistic design choices, because, you know, in the age of prosperity, you want to show off things that aren't necessarily 100% practical. They still obviously function as war machines, otherwise they wouldn't make them. But they make choices that you're kind of like, what are we doing here? And you see this in some of the Kirita mechs, which now look like giant samurai. And some of their older mechs already looked like that, but things like the Shiro and the Roko Rakubi really kind of take it to another level. And then, like, the Jade Falcons have mechs that have, you know, giant wings on the back of them, like the Shrike, the Irie, I think the Jade Talon, maybe. And now, again, it's one of those, like, you look at it and you're like, what purpose does that serve? I believe they're actually where the heat sinks are located. So they're spread out to have maximum surface area, but stylized to look like wings. But because of the maximum surface area, they're more effective. Now, you don't really see that in any kind of game stats or anything, but that's the excuse. But then they'll also have, like, talons on the feet, or like the Shrike, one of its arms ends in talons, whereas the other one's a gun arm. And, you know, the head will have like a beak and everything to really emphasize the bird aspect. Clan Wolf didn't have quite as many things like that, but I believe the War Wolf is the one that looks a lot like a stalking wolf. Well, more like a werewolf, because it's, you know, standing upright humanoid, but you get what I mean. The Lao had already kind of been undergoing that change back under Sun Tzu Lao, so they just kind of carried it forward a little bit more. But things like the Yuwong and the T Song, they already existed. So, you know, you see kind of less there, because they'd already kind of undergone there. Here's our mechs that are very clearly House Lao mechs moment. Although they did make their own version of the Victor, because the Victor is a Davian mech, and they obviously had a bunch, through Battlefield Salvage fighting the Davians, that have several of them, but they built their own version. Probably just they'd have one that didn't have the name Victor on it because of Victor Steiner Davian. Theirs is the Lu Y Bing. But if you ever take a look at the two of them side by side, it's pretty obvious that the Lu Y Bing is just the Victor with some house Lao stylings to it. Then the smaller factions, I don't think really have any like unique stuff of their own. And also, one of the big changes because of Clan Seafox, who is basically like traveling space Walmart. They'll sell anything to anybody. So because of that, all the Inner Sphere factions somehow or another do have access to clan technology. So their own mechs, like standard production mechs, have begun incorporating the better weapons and heat sinks and targeting computers and everything. It's still a mishmash. Some factions have these pieces, and some factions have these pieces. So the clans are still the ones that have, the whole enchilada. But most of them have begun to be able to reliably build some things on their own. Like Kirita, whenever Kirita double-crossed the Nova Cats and destroyed them, they took all their mech production facilities, obviously, and were able to reverse engineer a lot of the stuff. And so you begin to see this in some of their things like the Shiro and some of the other mechs. But it's approaching a point where the technology base is going to be completely merged and mixed, and you won't really see the distinct edge that the clan mechs had much anymore. Probably just in time for the homeworld clans to show up with even newer, more destructive toys, but we'll see. So that's the Dark Age in a nutshell. Now, the additional information that showed up in the lead up to the Ill Clan era is that, in all likelihood, what destroyed the HPG network was a thing called the Clarion Call. This was discussed in some of the books because Devlin Stone, the founder of the Republic, had himself frozen, and then he got himself thawed out and is now, was now back to, roaming around alive. And he and the one guy who was able to fix one of the HPGs began kind of going through everything, and they realized that, Devlin Stone knew about the Clarion Call thing because it was devised by the Word of Blake. And once the Republic beat the Word of Blake, I don't know if it was public or quiet, but they basically took all the Word of Blake stuff. So there's some of it incorporated into some of the things they have, like the big tripod super heavy mechs. I'm pretty sure those are based on Word of Blake technologies that allow them to function. So you have that, but also the idea of the Clarion Call was devised by the Word of Blake. It was a signal that could be sent by like a super HPG that would destroy the HPG network. And it appears that's what happened. That Stone knows it was activated. Now, the other guy thinks that Stone did it, but on his deathbed at the end of the Ill Clan book, he claims, apparently, from what I've read, I haven't read the book yet, sorry. He claims that a Word of Blake cell that still existed activated it in the hopes of plunging everything into chaos. Now, this is probably true because the Word of Blake is the religious faction within Comstar, and they treated their mission, which their mission was to save humanity and uplift everyone. They treated it as their holy writ, like this is what they were destined to do. And so, whenever they broke off from Comstar and initiated the Jihad and began nuking everybody, you have to remember Comstar controlled the mapping system. Okay? So what that means is Comstar could quite literally make planets disappear and ever so slowly remove them, planets out in the periphery, or even planets in the interior, and they'd write them off as, oh yeah, well, in the Second Succession War, a bunch of nukes got set off there, so no one lives there anymore, and it's totally inhospitable, so let's take it off the trade routes. And next thing you know, that planet just doesn't exist anymore. People don't make jumps into the system because they're worried they'll get stranded there because there's no recharge station. And if they get stranded there, they can't signal out because there's no HPG either, they think. So they avoid the system. And along a long enough timeline, that means the system doesn't exist anymore. Well, that's really damn convenient if you want to hide some things, like, say, whole armies and training facilities and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's really convenient if you've got a secret faction within your faction that wants to do that too. So there's a very, very high probability that there are still Word of Blake factions out there just hiding and waiting for their moment, because there's no possible way they got them all. They're definitely hiding on planets that are uncharted now, that used to be, or they're in the periphery somewhere. So the odds of them coming and doing this are high. But we'll have to see. Hopefully Catalyst will actually answer the question. I think they've said they're going to, so we'll see. But yeah, so that's pretty much the Dark Age setting from like a storyline perspective. Like I said, the other video is going to cover like why some of these things happen from a real world perspective, because there's a whole story and a whole host of drama over there too, and we'll get to that in part 2. So hopefully you stuck around all the way here through part 1. Any kind of comments, questions, anything that wasn't clear, because I know I'm throwing out a bunch of names of things that I haven't defined in other videos. And we're going to be hopefully fixing that real soon. So we're going to take a two-pronged approach on that. As far as like, we started the video series with Brad, trying to explain stuff to someone who knows nothing about the setting. But Chad and I are also going to hopefully make a series of like, so you want to know about this group, or you want to know about this topic, and let those play out. We've just been having to get some stuff together and get our schedules lined up, which hopefully we can do that very shortly. Or if it looks like it's going to be difficult, I'll do it solo if I have to. I just prefer not to. But we'll see. So anyway, folks, hopefully you got something out of this. If you did, we always appreciate likes and subscribes and share it around, but definitely the comments, because that helps us know what you guys want to hear, and we try to respond to all the comments. In fact, I think in all this time we've only had one singular negative comment. But if there's anything negative, let us know. If it's about the recording space here, you go ahead and make the comment, but I know I'm sitting in a car with the windows down and a highway behind me. Like, you're not going to tell me something I don't know there. But anyway, if you want to, go ahead and tell me that. Hopefully part 2 is probably also going to be a car video. We'll see, though. I'm going to try to put, hopefully in editing, I'll have been able to put up some graphics and whatnot as this story has gone along. If not, sorry, editing didn't go as I planned. I'd like to believe I'm getting better at that, but that's up to you guys, am I? So anyway, like I said, comments, likes, subscribes, all that jazz. But most importantly, thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you later.